silly question before you ask serious questions about the PMI. So, our sort of strive to find a purchasing manager.
Yes.
And we're yet to find one, or yet to get one to. Is a purchasing manager a procurement manager, or are they separate roles?
Yes. Purchasing manager is a general catch-all term for people who spend the money. Yeah, procurement manager.
Okay, cool. So they're the ones that send you the emails going, are you sure you want to charge that for that event? Or are you sure you can't come down a little bit? They're looking for the best deal, is that right?
I guess so.
I'm looking at the Robert Walters definition. A purchasing manager, also known as a purchasing director or a supply manager, heads a team responsible for procuring goods and services for resale or company use. They seek the best available quality for the lowest price. They evaluate suppliers, negotiate contracts, and review product quality. I've had a few run-ins with a few in my time.
Well, they have been speaking, and the message they have given is, to quote analysts, rosy. PMI score of 56.9 for the UAE for last month. That data out within the past few minutes. Dan Richards is standing by, senior economist, Emirates NBD. Morning, Dan.
Hi, good morning.
It's only a 2-page report. You've had a quick take. What is your quick take?
Quick take is still pretty good. So it did come down a little bit on the headline, 56.9 down from 57.1. But, that's still well above the neutral 50 level, still indicative of an economy that is firing all cylinders. And just to put it in comparison, everyone got excited earlier in the week about the Chinese PMI numbers having come in just above 50. For the UAE, they've been consistently in those mid-50 levels for several years now. So really reflecting what is going in the non-oil private sector, which is a pretty healthy outlook.
Well, there's good news and bad news in the report. Let's look at the good news first of all. What they call outstanding orders are at one of the highest levels in the past 15 years. They call, the economist David Owen at S&P says the economic picture is rosy. That's the glass half full take on it. How do you read it?
Yeah, so there are strong new order growth, and that has contributed to backlogs of work. Should be noted, though, less positively, some of that is to do with disruptions to activity caused by the Red Sea shipping incidents that are causing ships to go a long way around Africa, and that has led to delays in supplies, and that has led or contributed to that backlogs of work. So part of it is a positive story, part of it not so positive, but we expect that those obstacles should be ironed out. Companies are adjusting to that, continue to adjust. So we'd expect that those backlogs of work would start to come down over the coming months.
Yeah, highest in 15 years, those backlogs of work. The other negative, if I can call it that S&P highlights, is margins. This is what they say. Margins appeared to worsen as increased competition contributed to the strongest drop in output prices in nearly 4 years.
Yeah, so this is a trend we've really seen in the UAE for quite some time now, even when input prices are going up. So that is a cost that businesses are paying for raw materials. We've already seen oil prices heading up this year. We have these shipping cost disruptions as well, and also staff costs. The cost of hiring workforce is going up. But at the same time, in order to remain competitive in this growth dynamic market, firms are still cutting the prices they charge consumers. So that is good for us, but not necessarily good for businesses. For the time being, they can manage to do this given that there is growth in general activity, and the aggregate means they're still better off. But if that growth starts to slow, then maybe businesses will have to start raising their prices in order to maintain their margins somewhat better.
What did we learn about employment here in the UAE? I'm reading the last line of the report. It says, firms raised their employment numbers at a pace above the series trend for the second straight month. That's only 2 months. Can we read too much into that, Dan?
I think the employment subcomponent of the PMI has certainly been far more positive in recent readings than it was a year or two ago, when quite frequently, even as work was going up and new orders were coming in, firms were trying to do more with less. They weren't hiring. That trend does seem to have changed. There does seem to be a more substantial rise in employment month after month, and long may it continue.
Finally, you've got the Business Activity Optimism Index, again at a 4-year high.
Yeah, so I think we expect rates to start coming down. Inflation looks like it will be somewhat softer. The global slowdown is happening, but the expectation is, perhaps through the end of the year, that won't be quite as detrimental to growth here in the UAE. So things are generally looking up, especially with the higher oil prices, which does tend to boost optimism often here in the region. Then I think we can understand why firms are optimistic.
Dan, I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at the Saudi Arabia report yet. I mean, these things literally came out 10 minutes ago. The headline I'm looking at is business conditions strengthen rapidly in Saudi Arabia in March. Going to bring in Brandy Scott. Brandy, you've been looking at this one, I think, have you?
I've got it up in front of me. So let's have a look at the headlines that have come out from Saudi. As you say, business conditions are strengthening rapidly. We're coming in at 57, a sharp rise in the pace of new order volumes and softening input costs. How are you looking at it, Dan?
Yeah, so it's a similar story to what we've seen in the UAE from Saudi Arabia. The readings have been consistently well above the 50 level, and that is reflective of what is going on there in terms of the heavy investment into developing these new sectors. And when you see the respondents to the survey that gets written up every month, you often see them citing strong new project work. New projects are always ongoing, and that is supporting the growth in the private sector there.
Yeah, so I was curious about the Saudi PMIs. I mean, if I look at the main indicators of this, the purchasing growth is strong. The new business activity, which is the biggie, is on the up. The cost pressures are coming down. That's great. Employment as well, they're saying it's, additional staff hiring. We had a blip about 2 months or so ago in the Saudi PMIs, unexpected, but they seem to have got back on track since then. How are you taking that?
Yeah, it was a similar story in January for both Saudi Arabia and the UAE. In fact, there was a marked slowdown at the start of the year. It led to some expectations, perhaps, that growth wouldn't be as strong as previously anticipated. But that has turned around quite markedly over the last 2 months, really rebounding forcefully in February and again in March. So expectations as it stands is that the non-oil growth here will continue to be a pretty strong driver of the headline expansion. Oil sector, sure, probably not really driving growth again this year, given oil production curves remain in play, and we'll wait to see what comes out of OPEC later today, probably nothing very much. But the non-oil private sectors in the GCC are really firing on all cylinders.
Daniel Richards, Senior Economist, Emirates NBD. That report out within the past 15 minutes. Really appreciate you going through it quickly and giving us your analysis of that. Now, coming up on the Business Breakfast, looking forward to this one, Tom, talking electric cars. So much happening at the moment.
By 103.8.
Join the conversation.